I'm Nico Coetzee, I'm from PPS Financial Planning. I'm here this morning at the USB Leaders Angle. This morning I'm doing a presentation on financial planning by looking at the tale of two professionals and how they go through their life stages and the small financial decisions that they make impact on their ability to maintain their standard of living post-retirement. So what I want to do today is go through the life stages of two doctors and look at these little mistakes, little things that we think, you know what, I'm not going to save this 250 Rand now because it's, what's the big deal? So I'm going to show you the impact of these small mistakes and how the cumulative effect actually works against you and what then happens when you actually get to retirement. Okay, so we're going to follow two doctors through the life stages, evaluate how seemingly small financial decisions and have a major impact on their ability to achieve their objective. And what is our objective? So when we're engaging with financial advisors or financial planners or looking at our own financial situation, what is the thing that we're really trying to achieve? Well, really, we're just trying to maintain or improve actually our standard of living. That's really what we focused on doing. And the life stages that we're going to go through today, and these are the life stages that we've defined at PPS, is look at people from when they're a student to when they become young professionals, established, senior, and then retired. These are the two doctors. So the first doctor is Dr. Peter P. Sharpe. He studied medicine at Stellenbosch with Dr. Blunt, Dr. Ian B. Blunt. They both started working as GPs at the age of 25. Dr. Sharpe appoints a lifestyle financial planner to work with him throughout his life on his finances. Dr. Blunt, really, he relies on people calling him to sell him product. That's his approach to his finances. So I've said initially they both wish to retire at the age of 65. I've assumed inflation at 6%. We think that we can get inflation plus 4 in a diversified balanced portfolio. Cash you're getting around 6%. We're escalating the debit orders at 6. Post-retirement we're getting a slightly lower return because we're a little bit more conservative, so that's inflation plus 3. And I've assumed that they both earn an income of around 600,000 when they get to the age of 35. And I'm going to look at 7 decisions. Okay, so let's look at decision number 1. The decision number 1 is, do I start saving for retirement? So the two doctors, 25, Dr. Sharpe decides, you know what, I'm going to start small. I'm going to start saving 250 Rand now. Dr. Blunt decides, you know what, I don't need to start saving now. I'm going to wait 5 years. Now, if you look at the cost of that mistake, so it seems it's 250 Rand for 5 years. Actually, if you calculate the impact of that one decision, the cost of that error was over R1 million, almost 1.1 million just on that little decision. So that's the difference between starting to save at the age of 25, 250 Rand, and starting to save that amount at the age of 30. It'll cost you R1 million. Decision number 2, still at the age of 25, Dr. Sharpe engages with his lifestyle planner. He says, you've got to think about your earnings potential and what happens with you, what happens if you're no longer able to practice your specific occupation. Decides to buy sickness and disability cover. Dr. Blunt says, you know what, no thanks. I'm going to spend this money on going out. I'm going to live forever, so I'm not going to worry about it. Then at the age of 45, if Dr. Blunt becomes permanently incapacitated at the age of 45, and he doesn't have any sickness or disability cover, he will miss out on 39 million Rands worth of payments over those 20 years. So that's the amount of money that you would need in order to cover his income from the age of 45 to 65. So I'm not going to include that in the overall cost of the error. That's like a once-off thing to say if things don't go well. Okay, so if you don't reach your retirement in a fairly healthy shape. Decision number 3, now we get to the age of 30. Okay, now they're changing jobs. Dr. Sharpe says, you know what, I've now accumulated 250,000 Rand in my retirement fund. I'm going to preserve my retirement fund savings. I don't necessarily need access to this money now. I'm going to leave it for what it was intended, which is to fund my retirement. Dr. Blunt says, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy myself a car. Okay. The question then is, what's the cost of that error? Well, we can see that decision cost Dr. Blunt 8 million Rand. Decision 4, now, we're maybe starting with the family. Dr. Sharpe says, you know what, I've got to start thinking about life cover. What happens if I pass away? What will happen to my family? Dr. Blunt says, I am not thinking about this. And then at the age of 45, one of his parents passes away, and suddenly this whole mortality becomes a reality to him, and he says, okay, I'm going to buy, now I need life cover, I'm going to buy life cover now. And what I did is I said, so at the age of 30, you're obviously a lot healthier, potentially, than you are at the age of 45. So when you buy life cover, then it's a lot cheaper. So what I said is, what's the difference if you buy it at the age of 30, that then escalates, and you buy that amount that it's escalated to at the age of 45 as a 45-year-old? And we then look at the difference in the costs. So Dr. Blunt will pay 140,000 Rand more over that from the age of 45 to 65. He'll pay 140,000 Rand more than Dr. Sharpe for exactly the same amount of life cover. We look at decision 5, which is very often people underestimate the impact of negotiating fees on the investments. So when you have your retirement savings, Dr. Sharpe says, I'm going to look at what I'm paying, and he works with his planner to negotiate his total cost of ownership of his investments down to 2%. Dr. Blunt says, you know what, I'm not going to worry about it, it'll be fine, and he ends up paying 4%. Now that 2% per year from 35 to 65 actually ends up costing Dr. Blunt 3.8 million. It's the compounding effect in reverse. We call it the tyranny of costs. Because we know, the lower the cost, the more you end up keeping in your glass. Decision 6, now there's age of 45. They both get a windfall, so maybe potentially an inheritance. I said earlier that one of the parents passes away. There's R1 million. And this is something that happens very often in South Africa. Money comes in. Dr. Sharpe says, you know what, I'm going to invest it in a balanced portfolio, in a diversified portfolio, where I'm getting exposure over a number of different asset classes, potentially a number of different asset managers. Dr. Blunt says, you know what, I'm just going to put it in the money market. So I just don't want to lose it, and just leave it there. Now the impact of the difference in those returns over that 20-year period is an extra 4 million. Okay, so now we get to the age of 65. So if we add it all up, what we see is Dr. Sharpe now has an investment. There's his investment from the windfall. He has the preservation fund. That's that 250,000 Rand that he preserved when he changed jobs at the age of 30. He has a pension fund, which he was contributing to, and where he paid 2% fees. And he has that was the retirement annuity, and he has that investment that he invested in a diversified portfolio. Dr. Blunt didn't. He has a retirement annuity, but he started later. He doesn't have a preservation fund at all because he bought that very nice 1980 Golf. He has a pension fund, but he paid 4%, and he has an investment that gave him a lower return. So the overall cumulative cost of all of those decisions, 17 million Rand. So Dr. Sharpe has double the capital at retirement than Dr. Blunt. At the age of 65, Dr. Sharpe has an income of 20,000 Rand per month in today's terms. So I'm using the present value. That's not, on 34 million? If you take inflation into account, the actual income that he gets at the age of 65 is only 20K. Dr. Blunt, and that's if he takes 8% of the capital, which is tight. He will probably be able to maintain his capital, but it's still a bit touch and go. Dr. Blunt says, no, he wants 10% because even at 10% he's only getting 13,000. Okay, which is also, that's also in today's terms. Obviously, if you take 10% of a 17 million Rand retirement portfolio, the actual amount will be higher, but actually in today's terms, it's only worth 13,000. So now there's a decision that they have to make. Do I retire now, or do I work longer? Now, if you look at what's happening is, if you look at the age of 65, in the year 1800, you would have been dead 27 years ago. In 1900, you would have been dead 12 years ago. 2000, you had 12 to 15 years to go. And what they say in the year 2100, which I'm doubtful whether we'll make it, but we'll only be halfway there, which is actually quite scary, and not just from a physical health perspective, but from a financial planning perspective. We have to change the way we think about retirement and when we retire. And we actually see this specifically in the graduate professional market, where generally speaking, our clients retire much later. Okay, so what is that, Dr. Sharpe? Dr. Sharpe decides, you know what, I'm going to work for another 5 years. grow my retirement capital, then retire. Dr. Blunt says, you know what, I'm going to retire now. Just draw my capital. So what happens is Dr. Sharpe's capital lasts another 37 years until the age of 107, and Dr. Blunt's lasts 14 years. So the net result of all of these decisions, if we forget about the numbers, just look at the actual impact in retirement, is that Dr. Sharpe can draw double Dr. Blunt's income for 23 years longer. Okay, now that's massive, and I think that's how we have to start. We have to think with the end in mind. So let's look at some of the lessons that we've learned. Let's go back to the future and let's work through them. So what have we learned? First of all, time really is money. It applies at any age throughout your lifetime. The sooner you start, the better, even if it's a small amount. Secondly, you are your biggest asset. That relates to that 39 million rand number. That is your ability to earn an income. Don't focus on the short term. That relates to the preserving the retirement fund. And sometimes it's difficult to think so far in advance, but don't think just about fulfilling that short-term need. It's the single biggest contributor to people not being able to retire in South Africa, is that they don't preserve the money that they've already accumulated in their retirement funds. Life and death happens, unfortunately. You know, we have to think about those things, and less so maybe when we're younger, but the sooner you start thinking about it, the better, because the sooner you buy it, the easier you're going to get it. Compounding can work against you. We saw that with the fee example. In terms of managing our costs, those are the three parties: that the advisor, the administrator, the asset. Remember, think of the 3 A's. Generally speaking, avoid initial fees. Maybe the advisor charges an initial fee for the planning that they do, but the admin and the asset management, no fees. And on an ongoing basis, the advice fee has to be negotiable, and the admin fee has to be less than 1, and the asset management fee has to be related to the actual risk that the asset manager is taking. Avoid reckless conservatism. It's rife in South Africa. People love money markets, and the moment they get scared, they switch all of their money out of their diversified portfolios into the money market fund. We call it reckless conservatism because you may feel safe, but actually you're not safe. It's actually riskier to be in a money market fund in the long term, because your volatility or your risk in nominal terms might be low, but your volatility in terms of inflation is extremely high. It's actually less in an equity fund. Retirement is just a tax event. That's all it is. Just the day that you decide, okay, now I want this money, then there's a tax event that happens where they say, if you're in a pension fund, you can take a third and you have to annuitize 2/3, or if you're in a provident fund, you can take the full 3/3. You don't have to retire. You can work longer if you want to. And generally speaking, that's actually when your money can really work hard for you. So just that extra, we saw in my example, Dr. Sharpe working an extra 5 years, it actually boosted his income for the rest of his life by 25%. So he went from 20,000 a month to 25,000 a month just by working an additional 5 years. There are a couple more concepts that I want to share with you that will help you protect you against making these mistakes. The first thing is, in South Africa, we have a pretty negative outlook on financial advisors, but often they are the only thing that stands between you and a very big mistake. And there's a new type of financial planning that's coming into South Africa. It's called lifestyle-based planning, that actually says financial planning is not just about your money. It's actually about that place where your money and your life intersects. It's really about understanding what your life goals are, and then talking to a person that can relate to what you currently have from a financial perspective to assist you in achieving your objectives. The person should listen to you first, then ask you some questions to try and ascertain your financial health, and then give you a diagnosis. And a diagnosis that you can understand. Not a plan with lots of complicated numbers and graphs and terms that you can't understand. The key value add of a good financial planner is someone that can assess your entire situation. Even if you approach them just with one issue, they can look at you holistically and then guide you in a certain direction. I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. We've still got 15-20 minutes for questions. More than happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.